Hey, yo, what's good, everyone? Twisted here with Open Sorcery, and today I want to go ahead and talk about a news story that I found rather interesting and wanted to go ahead and share with anyone who's listening in and all of that. Now, the particular news story I'm talking about comes from New Zealand, and it's all about Mount Taranaki, a local mountain there, which recently there was a law passed that now considers it as a person. In regards to that right there, I have an excerpt from a CNN article going ahead and speaking on it, as well as a couple other articles with tidbits of information. But also I want to go ahead and play connect the dots in regards to different spiritual takes on it, different religious takes, that sort of thing. In other cultures and belief systems around the world that kind of go ahead and either parallel or mirror this sort of legal designation given unto Mount Taranaki, and pretty much try to go ahead and get the point across, that this sort of legal determination is not necessarily out of whack, at least in regards to how people way back when, or more so connected to nature and live more so of a, you could say, rural as opposed to urban lifestyle, or just more so naturalistic lifestyle happen to interpret things and all of that. But yes, I digress. I will go ahead and actually go ahead and read just a couple paragraphs worth from the CNN article that gives a broad summary of this right here. So, Mount Taranaki, now known as Taranaki Manga, its Maori name, is the latest natural feature to be granted personhood in New Zealand, which has ruled that a river and a stretch of sacred land are people before. The pristine snow-capped dormant volcano is the second highest on New Zealand's North Island at 2,518 meters, which equates to about 8,261 feet. New Zealand is the first country in the world to recognize natural features as people, and they did so when they passed a law in 2014 which granted personhood to T.O.R, which I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but it's a vast native forest on the North Island. In 2017, New Zealand recognized the Whanganui River as human. And I butchered that pronunciation, definitely for sure. So, pretty much, Mount Taranaki has been considered as a person now, that has its own sentience, its own legal protections, responsibilities, just like a regular person, in fact, would, and all that sort of thing. And even outside of just the legal frameworks and all of that, Mount Taranaki is already considered by the Maori people, the native folk of New Zealand, as Maunga Tupuna. I should go ahead and say that again. Maunga Tupuna, I believe, is more so the proper pronunciation, in case I didn't get it right the first time. But it's pretty much Maori for ancestral mountain. Not only do they consider the mountain as a place itself, but as a literal ancestor of theirs from which they're descended from. And this is, the root of why they put such a law into place to recognize this location's personhood. And when it comes to the idea of a mountain itself having consciousness, having a manner of being, a manner of it being alive, and all that sort of thing, this comes from, in terms of like a general sort of sense in classification of the religious or the spiritual idea, the concept of animism. Now, this is something that I went ahead and broached previously when on, the channel and all their postings of it, right? We went ahead and, actually, this was a solo take of mine. It was about panpsychism and animism, places and things as being conscious. Now, right here, I do have a excerpt from Wikipedia, which I believe I used as a source at that time to to go ahead and talk about the concept itself, but I'll go ahead and cover animism itself to go ahead and once again, it's maybe the same thing. I'm not exactly sure in terms of the memory because it was quite a while ago, but anyways, I digress. Animism encompasses the beliefs that all material phenomena have agency, that there exists no categorical distinction between the spiritual and physical or material world, and that soul, spirit, or sentience exists not only in humans, but also in other animals, planets, rocks, geographic features, such as mountains or rivers, or other entities of the natural environment, water sprites, vegetation deities, tree spirits, etc. Animism may further attribute a life force to abstract concepts such as words, true names, or metaphors in mythology. Now, that is more so of, when it comes to animism, more so of like a core spiritual category, or was considered as like the world's first religion if you talk to historians and all of that pretty much everything was alive. And then from that sprang more so specific religions and all that sort of thing, whether it be polytheistic in nature, which it means, there's many gods, or even the monotheistic religions, which mono, the prefix, means one, so that those are religions with one god in of itself. Now, when it comes to other belief systems, that happen to be more so animistic in its nature, and also are Polynesian, just like that of the Maori people in the New Zealand islands and region. There's, in the Hawaiian culture, right? One example I can go ahead and just immediately think of is how the island of Maui itself is considered by its native population, along with some outsiders as well, known as Hali, who happen to, have lived on the island and experienced it and are a little more so in tune with the nature, spirits, and just the natural, landmarks of the area. They consider the island of Maui as having consciousness and being considered as a physical manifestation of the demigod from their mythology, which it derives, its namesake from, and that being demigod Maui itself. So that in of itself is something that was covered previously by me a little bit more recently. Several months ago at the time of this recording, of the concept of Kino Lau, which is material forms of Hawaiian gods, themselves. And while I didn't use the particular example of Maui back then, it still definitely applies, by all means. Now, just going ahead and once again, as I stated beforehand, connecting the dots and showcasing just several more examples to kind of go ahead and be Mr. Repetitive and Mr. Hammer and Nail of trying to make sure that, the concept is solidified in the brain of those listening and what have you. Right here we have in Shinto that many natural fixtures like mountains are considered as kami, a Japanese term for gods, along with other ones like rivers, forests, individual trees, and so on. Now, with that, right, we can go ahead and just think of various different natural fixtures, but not gonna lie, for this example, furthering it, I'm going to go ahead and stay within the theme of mountains themselves, and one of which that is surely considered to be a kami in its own right is the famous Mount Fuji, which is either the tallest mountain on the Japanese Isles, if I'm not mistaken, or at least one of the most I'm kind of going ahead and getting a little bit of a foggy brain here because of the late time that I'm going ahead and recording this, but yes, it's either one of the tallest mountains or the tallest mountain on the Japanese Isles. But yes, not only is Mount Fuji deemed a kami itself, but also it is considered as being inhabited by and associated with a kami. I believe it is a goddess, and I believe that goddess's name is Konohana Sakuya Hime. Now, when it comes to any groupings of mountainous deities within Shinto, they're referred to as Yama no Kami. So any kami, any gods, any particular deities that are associated with mountains are considered as Yama no Kami, once again. Now, to go ahead and cite another example to kind of like round it out, and at least for myself and anyone potentially listening who are local to the American continent, I'll go ahead and say that in looking closer to home, there's this Native American concept and stance that I believe goes ahead and is hand in hand with the ruling of Mount Taranaki being a person, it having its own agency and determination, and pretty much not being owned by anybody else. And that right there is the Native American concept that, land isn't owned by anyone. And I just have an excerpt here as per worldhistory.org, and honestly that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave it off at after reading this and all of that to tie it all up. The Native American concept of land ownership differs significantly from that of the European settlers who colonized the Americas, or their descendants in that land cannot be owned, only stewarded and lived with. The earth is understood by Native Americans as a living sentient being, and therefore no one can claim ownership. To Native Americans, the earth is one's relative, requiring respect and care, as are all the animals and plant life that land supports. The definition of one's relatives encompasses all living things, not just the members of one's family. And so, just as one would not claim to own a relative, one cannot own the land. One can only act as a steward in caring for it. So, this right here goes ahead and takes out possessiveness from the equation of how humans interrelate to, the earth as a whole, or particular chunks of land, countries, all that sort of thing, right? And that is definitely in lockstep with the idea that Mount Taranaki is in fact its own person, its own living being, that has its own manner of consciousness, sentience, agency, whatever term you deem appropriate, and all of that sort of thing. And, this news story just went ahead and it didn't necessarily go ahead and put a light bulb in my head in terms of like something I didn't realize before, but it just went ahead and was a nice reminder of these sorts of things and keeping that within the forefront of my brain. And hopefully, if there's anyone who is listening presently, that this isn't necessarily something that, is just a refresher, but is more so of a new concept or idea, that you go ahead and you sit with it, you reflect on it, you go ahead and see what you think and feel in regards to it. And of course, obviously, if this is something you've come across before, reflection as well, just like I did, and going ahead and being reminded of it, whether you agree or disagree with the concept. But at least I personally hope that this concept goes ahead and more so sinks into your brain, and you come to realize that no matter what sort of title deeds that a person may have, no matter what sort of stake or claim that is put on the land, or anything like that, it is alive, it is existing, it does have a manner of awareness, and we should go ahead and try to do better to treat it with respect as best as we can, wherever we may happen to be, whether it's mountains or rivers, lakes, trees, forests, so on and so forth. But all about striving for better and all that good stuff. But I've said enough, and I'll leave it at that. So this has been Twisted with Open Sorcery, and stay frosty, Neguses. Peace.